Welcome back to another Star Sports Betting, people, and I have some fabulous news. I am no longer interviewing behind the screen on Zoom. I am here, and as you can tell, I am here at Goodwood, and it is a glorious day as per usual here at Goodwood. Now, the reason I'm here today is because I am interviewing Ed Arkell, who is clerk of the course. So without further ado, let's meet Ed. With Ed Arkell, who is clerk of the course, and we're going to find out a little bit about his job. So Ed, can you tell me a little bit firstly, what exactly is the clerk of the course?
So the clerk of the course looks after all the racing aspect of the race course, so the racing surface that we're standing on now, and then anything to do with owners, trainers, horses, jockeys and stables, and usually the lawns and green spaces as well.
So how did you get into this? Because for me, I can't imagine this is something at school you said this is what I want to be, unless it is.
No, it wasn't. I been racing at Cheltenham and was lucky enough to know Simon Clace, who was clerk there then, and he gave me a job driving a vet, and I got hooked. And everybody I met, I said, "Can I come and shadow you, or have you got a job on a race day?" So I've done, fence attending at Warwick, or helped in the stables at Ascot, and all that sort of thing. And then I worked for John Dunlop, the trainer, for a couple of years, and then got a trainee clerk's job.
Did you ever ride yourself, or?
No, nobody was stupid enough to let me loose on a race course with a racehorse. It's bad enough on the gallops, but yeah.
So just tell me a little bit about what it is like for you on a race day. So what would be your schedule? So
I'd be in for about 5:30 in the morning, do half an hour sort of paperwork, emails and bits and pieces, and then we walk the track, give the going update by about 6:45. So that the owners, trainers, jockeys and everybody know what's going on. Answer any phone calls from trainers. There'll always be a few queries about ground or this and that. Pop down to the stables, make sure everything's all right there, have some breakfast in the canteen, see any of the travelling head lads that have been in overnight. Back up to the race course, do a few bits and pieces, and then we walk the track again about 2 hours before racing with the chairman of the stewards, just as sort of final check and another pair of eyes, and then we get into racing. Once we start racing, providing everything's going okay, it's very much sort of, be about parade ring up to the steward's box to watch the races and just generally talking to people. It's when things go wrong, you start to earn your money with doctors, vets and all that sort of thing.
So just going back to your emails and things like that, do you have to email most of the trainers in the morning, or do you ring them?
No, that's all done automatically on the BHA racing admin site. So we upload our details there onto the system and then upload onto the main site, which then notifies all the trainers, and the trainers can pop on, have a look at it, and they can look at not just the going for here but anywhere in the next 10 days. And then the various owners and jockeys will have access to that as well. But there'll always be queries from trainers, maybe they're just not quite sure, is it going to be all right for the horse, or what's it going to do, is the rain going to come? I think the worst one for us is when the weather forecast's a little uncertain or there's rain on the day, and then trainers have obviously entered horses hoping for it to rain or hoping it won't rain, and then everybody gets a little bit twitchy.
Now, before we get into that, because obviously as we know the going is very important for racing, but I just wanted to know, are you a one-man band, or do you have a whole team to help you?
I've got a ground team of 6 people here, so they're the ones that do all the hard work, make this track look as well as it does. We strim all around this running rail. There's about 5.5 miles of running rail. We strim around that at least once a week. So they do all the hard work, but actually when it comes to walking the track and giving the going, it's myself, and the head groundsman comes with me sometimes.
Now, I just pictured a huge lawnmower. So yep. It's an actual strimmer that comes along the grass and trims it?
No, we'd actually mow the track. We've got a 7-metre wide mower, so you get through your lawn fairly quickly. Yeah. But actually under the rail you can see all the running rail in each side. Yeah. We'd trim around that, because obviously you can't get a mower underneath it. You can mow both sides, but then you've got a running rail leg every however often. So there's about 5 miles to do. So when you have the lawnmower, how do you stop it from cutting it too short? Because that's another thing I want to ask. There's a specific length, isn't there, for the grass and what it has to be? Yeah, sort of 3 to 4 inches for flat racing. Up here we tend to stick at 4 inches, and you can set the mower very easily. It's a huge professional piece of kit. So that works easily enough, and it's just a case of virtually winding the wheels down or up, depending whether you want to raise or lower the cart height.
Well, I think now we're talking about grass, let's have a look at the grass. Now, I'm sure you guys can see, it's just the most perfect grass, isn't it, on a track? And how do you maintain it?
Very much, we have a fertiliser programme that we put in place. That's what keeps it growing. Really, grass only just needs water, a bit of sunlight and some food to keep growing. So that's the sort of the basis of it. And then regular mowing, we adjust the height of the mowing quite a lot, and that just keeps the sward thick in the bottom. We do various aeration work, slitting it and spiking it, and that just helps the roots go down, because the most important thing on the surface is to have a good, solid, stable surface that doesn't chop up too much or doesn't become loose when the horses are running on it. So the more you can do to cut into it, so a slitter would be effectively a roller with knife blades on it. It just keeps putting slits into the soil and helps the roots get down deep, and also does what's called root pruning, which is effectively cutting the roots and encouraging them to grow again.
What happens if we've had a really hot summer? Because grass can get burnt, can't it?
Grass can get burnt. We spend a lot of time irrigating, and irrigating is a bit of a dark art. It's very controversial, but at the end of the day, the injury statistics are very clear that the quicker the ground gets, the worse the injury rate is. There's also the misconception you just put enough water on to keep the grass growing. Well, if you do that, you're just watering the very top surface, and all that happens is, instead of the roots going right down, the roots go down, find they can't get any water, and then start to come back up to find the water, and then it's shallow rooting. It goes back to what we were discussing before about the top chipping off. So you've either got to not water it at all, which means you won't have a racecourse, especially up here in the summer, or you have to keep plenty of moisture in it, so you've got water right through the profile, and then the roots go right down and you get a good solid root base.
Where did you learn all of this? Is it something you learn on the job then, as you know, when you ask for jobs?
Yeah, I'm very much. I did a land agent's degree at university, but really you do about a year's training programme once you get a trainee clerk's job, and you have to do various groundsman's courses as part of that, and then it's learning on the job, and it always takes time. I've done all sorts of tracks, everywhere from Sedgefield down to here, and every track is different, and you have to learn what the track likes and what it doesn't like, and what works really well at Sedgefield, for example, will not work at Goodwood. We're very high up on the downs here, it dries very fast, so it's a very different situation from doing, say, Sedgefield or Lingfield that can get so wet on clay soil.
And is that why, like a place like Lingfield, they have an all-weather track, because it will get so wet?
Why they put in at Lingfield, I don't know, but it's a fascinating track and very different, because they did a lot of work to it. When they put the all-weather in, they realigned the back straight, and obviously, as with everything, soil takes time to settle down, and this part of the track we're on now here at Goodwood was built in the 1850s, so the track originally stops about the 3 furlong marker. And then it was extended by the Duke and George Bentinck to make a longer, flatter straight. So if you look over the rail on the far side, you can see there'll be up to a sort of 50 or 60 foot drop down into the car park. Well, this is all man-made ground, and this part of the track will react differently from anything past the 3 furlong marker that was natural ground. And you can virtually walk in about 3 yards. You can tell where you've walked off one onto the other, just because of the way it reacts differently, and it needs a bit more water than this does, or this holds its moisture better than that, whichever way you want to look at it.
How do you maintain the track off season?
What we tend to do as soon as we finish racing is we'll cut this down as short as we can, so we'll get down to about 1.5 inches, and then we put some scarifying discs and rakes through it to really rake out all the dead matter, the lateral growth, the thatch. Really make sure we've got all of that out, because that tends to hold on to the moisture, and it's also, if you allow it to build up too much, it becomes a perfect little habitat for turf pests like leather jackets and chafer grubs, which then eat the turf root, and then effectively it's like running on a mat on a polished floor. You know how it just pulls up underneath you, and you can literally just pick the turf up if you get an infestation of those. So we do that, and then we'd probably slit it, spike it, overseed it, so we'd put on something like 20 grams of grass seed a square metre in with a direct drill, so about 1.5 tons of grass seed. Get that going, put some fertiliser on it, and then literally just leave it alone all winter, and start to think about probably giving it a cut, depending what the winter and the spring's like. But sort of March time, we'd probably go over it with we've got a ride-on mower. It's got 1.5 metre cutting deck, and we'll literally cut with that, and it'll take the team about 5 or 6 days to do it, just because it'll still be too wet to put the big tractor and mower on it.
So even though you have a period of time where you leave the track alone, I'd be right in saying that actually you have to keep an eye on it all year, don't you?
Yeah, I'd walk it at least once a week during the winter, and probably twice or 3 times a week in the summer, and obviously more if we're racing. So if we're racing, we'll be walking every day or a couple of times a day, just depending what's going on, and if we're watering, to see what the effect the water is having. Because obviously you don't want to put too much or too little on, because then you've got to go back over it, or if you put too much on, you can't undo that. But with the watering, we know fairly much what's going on, and also we can look at the evapotranspiration rate, which is the amount of moisture that's being lost through the grass, going up through being alive and also through the evaporation. And then looking at those figures, we can then work out how much water roughly we need to be putting on it. So it's not just the case, everybody seems to think we just go along and throw water at it. And it's not just a case of going and throwing 10 millimetres at everything or 5 millimetres. You know, we'll put 10 on some of it, run it down to 8 or 5, depending on how well the ground holds the moisture. And also we use something called wetting agents, which very basically stick water molecules to soil molecules, so that we make best use of the water available, so that we're not having to go over it as often. And that also helps when it gets very wet in getting the excess water through the soil profile and down into the chalk.
When you're walking the track, can you feel it with your feet?
Yes.
Exactly, you can?
Yeah, if you walk it often enough. And I can even, I've got a pair of thick boots on, I can feel it through those, but just occasionally if you walk barefoot, you can really feel it. But yeah, you can, you just know. And also you can tell by looking at the grass whether it needs moisture or not. The blades start to get thinner, it starts to get a sort of dark, dully green. When you've cut your lawn and you put the clippings onto the pile, after about an hour in the summer they go that sort of dark green and don't look very happy in life, which is exactly the same with this. So you can see just from walking it.
What happens if it's terrible weather and the ground is really churned up? How do you turn that around to make it good for the next meeting?
We've got a team of treaders, some of whom you've just seen go past now, and then we have another team in on after racing, and we will put that all back by hand. We'll fork it back, so we'll put a fork into the ground, lift the divots out, any big lumps that have been kicked out we'll put back. The real problem with doing that is if you have a very wet race day in the middle of the summer, and then you get very hot afterwards, the divots just die off. So what you're actually better to do is get rid of the divots and then fill with seed and soil. Up here we try and do that as little as possible, because it's not the best way. It's difficult to get the seed to germinate up here in the height of the summer. And also when you're then racing on it, particularly if you're racing a number of days in succession or once a week, you just see when the horses run, all you see is a poof, poof of soil coming out, which looks horrible, and also you then got to go and put it back again, as well as all the other divot marks straight away. So yeah.
Not a nice time.
No.
Now, I was asking before when I was at Lingfield about the course and the drainage system, and I learnt that actually there's a huge drainage system that happens. I know we mentioned before we're on the downs, so we're high up. Do you not need that here?
We've got a tiny bit of drainage up here, but very little, just in a couple of small spots. You can see we're up on the downs and you've got high points and low points, and obviously over millions of years those low points have just got a little bit more soil in them than some of the other bits. So those bits, just in places we've just put a little bit of drainage in, but otherwise no. Our problem is trying to keep the moisture in and not get it through on the whole.
How do they put the drainage system in? Because surely you would have to dig up the whole track in order to put it in.
You've got chain trenches, so imagine a large chainsaw, like a really large chainsaw, and then it'll put slits in, they'll put the drainage work in, and then backfill it, and then you've got to grow it in with seed and soil and water and fertiliser and what have you.
It's a big job, I can imagine. Now let's just chat about what you've got in your hand here.
Yep.
So tell me about this.
Right, so this is my stick, which is what I walk around and put in the ground. Every clerk will have something different. Some like pointed sticks, some like flat end sticks. For me, this suits me brilliantly. It doesn't wear down too fast because we've got the metal tip on it. Otherwise up here the stick wears down really quickly, and it's like a car or anything like that, you get used to a stick. So if you're having to change it the whole time because it wears down, it's not great, and I'd kill a stick a season up here if I didn't have the metal on the end of it. For jump racing, I'd have a flat end on it, just because you probably want slightly softer ground, or you want to know if it's getting quick sooner jumping than you do with a flat. And then I walk around the course and put the stick into the ground, and it just depends how far in it can go, how difficult it is to push it into the ground, what it feels like when it goes in. And people say, well, how do you know? Do you have notches on the stick? And no, I don't. It's feel. It's the same way that if I said to you, when you're coming up to some traffic lights in your car, how do you know when to brake? You know when to brake because instinct tells you that you need to give it however far and you're going however fast and X, Y, and Z. And it's no different from that. So that's the one I use to give the going description. And then you will see on the going descriptions a number afterwards. And that is from this, which is a going stick, and it produces a number, so 7.6 say. And what you have to do is push this into the ground and pull it back so it measures penetration and shear. You do that 3 times and that gives you the description in one of 80 locations around the track. And then that will spit out a number, it'll average out, spit out a number, and that number will correlate to whatever the going description you've given is.
So back in the day before you had this technology, what did you use? Would it just be the stick?
Just the stick, yeah.
Oh really?
Yeah. So this is just a really good tool. Originally the plan with that was that 7.6 at Goodwood would be the same as 7.6 at Salisbury, Hamilton, anywhere. And unfortunately what they found is that every track has a different soil type and reacts a bit differently. So now there's a sort of graph that relates the number on that going stick to a going description, and hopefully everything balances up. And it's effectively another pair of eyes. And also you can then start looking at race times as well. And James Willoughby's been doing some very interesting research on that, race times and going descriptions, and the ratings of horses. And that's something that hopefully we'll see a bit more of in the next sort of 6 months to a year.
And just quickly, just in case someone's watching this and perhaps they don't know much about horse racing, why is the going so important?
Every horse acts on different ground. As you hear, you've got horses for courses. We all say it everyday life. And some horses want quicker ground, some want easier ground. And you know, the trainers want to get the best out of their horses, so they want to have everything in their favour. Hence, I mean, you can see at the moment there are 2 travelling head lads just behind us having a look at the ground for their runners for today.
So as we're on the track, what can you tell me about this grass? Are you happy with this grass? Is this the perfect, ideal?
Yeah, it's for the time of year and the season we've had, it looks great.
Yeah.
You know, if it was looking like this in the middle of the summer for Glorious, I'd be I'd be a little disappointed with it. But for the time of year and considering what it's had, it's in great condition.
It's so cushiony, and I'm sure you guys can see. I'm just going to bend down. I mean, look, so what did you say? That's 4 inches?
That's 4 inches, yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, Ed, thank you so much. That's
Pleasure.
really insightful. And have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
So I've now been joined by Ralph, who is a course walker, and I've just managed to catch him before he does the last lap, is it, of your course? Now, just tell me a little bit about you and what you do at Goodwood.
Basically, it's quite simple, really. We walk the course, we split into 2 teams, and we walk the course, check the running rails, check for any damage overnight, so it's safe for racing later. And at the end of the day, we split into the same 2 teams and walk it again.
And how long have you done this for?
Since 1998.
Wow. And Ralph, if you don't mind saying how old you are?
85.
See, you don't look a day over 21.
And I've worked on Goodwood since 1974. Nothing else you need, is there, really?
No, well, thank you so much, Ralph, and enjoy the rest of your walk down the course. It's a beautiful day as well, and actually I can't imagine there's a nicer place to work.
No, as I say, you know, it's therapeutic.